The movie opens with a couple stopping at a gas station to fill up their car tank. It turns out that someone is keeping an eye on them from nearby, while the couple continues driving down the deserted country road. The husband notices another car following them, and it soon overtakes them. However, a few moments later, the same car turns around and tries to collide with them. Following this, the mysterious man from the other car gets out and approaches the wrecked vehicle. The couple appears to be already dead, but he only drags the woman out and places her in his car. Later, we see him driving down a snowy mountain and entering an isolated cabin. He lays the woman down on a table and removes her clothes. The psychopath then takes out a butcher's knife and brutally hacks her body into pieces. In the next scene, the man returns to his city apartment and stores the raw meat in the fridge. Here, we realize that this guy is a cannibal who only eats women's meat. His name is Carlos, and he works as a tailor in a shop near his apartment building. In the evening, as Carlos hurries home in the pouring rain, he encounters a beautiful woman at the doorway. It turns out she is a new resident in the building, and her name is Alexandra. The man helps her carry her bags. After a brief chat, Carlos heads to his room, but he's unable to stop thinking about her. He watches her through his window and notices her arguing on the phone with someone. Carlos then goes to the kitchen and takes out a block of human meat from the fridge. He cooks it like a steak and eats it with the utmost satisfaction. The next morning, Carlos is at the store when he notices Alexandra moving boxes into her apartment. He looks at her with a smile, indicating that he's into her. In the evening, she watches him from her apartment, and it seems that Alexandra likes him as well. One day, while he is working at his store, Alexandra unexpectedly arrives to meet him. She shows interest in the fabrics and tools he uses, and the woman then gives him flyers advertising the private massage room in her apartment. She asks if he could post these in his shop to help her get customers, as he is a well-known guy in town. Carlos is hesitant, but Alexandra says that she charges others €60, whereas he can come at any time for free. He then agrees to put up the flyers and promises to do what he can. Before she leaves, she tells him that she is serious about the invitation. Later that night, Carlos pins her flyer to a board in his apartment next to his pictures of human anatomy. One evening, while Carlos is designing clothes, he hears Alexandra screaming and arguing with someone on the phone. He briefly observes her through the window but chooses not to interfere and focuses on his work. Sometime later, he gets a knock on his door, and it turns out to be Alexandra. She explains that she had a fight with someone and needs a witness to report it to the police. She asks him to tell the cops what he witnessed, but Carlos says he did not see or hear anything and claims he doesn't want to get in trouble. Hearing this, Alexandra asks him to give her at least a glass of water. The man heads to the kitchen, but she follows him and then opens the fridge, which is only filled with meat. She asks why he doesn't have anything else, but Carlos is irritated by her behavior and simply urges her to close the fridge. Here, the woman starts flirting with him, but Carlos rejects her advances and asks her to leave. However, Carlos has a change of heart and stops her. He offers to accompany her to the police station. Alexandra promptly agrees, and the two drive away from there. The scene suddenly shifts to the following day. Carlos is seen entering a church, where an official assigns him the task of creating a sacred cloak. It is his life's biggest and most important project, and he is very excited to get started. The following day, a familiar-looking woman appears at Carlos' door. She introduces herself as Alexandra's sister, Nina, and says that she has not heard from her in 2 days. She explains that they had a phone fight 2 days ago, and that Alexandra has been missing ever since. But Carlos responds that he knows nothing about her, so Nina decides to call the cops and begins to leave, but Carlos abruptly stops her. He mentions he has a police friend and offers to ask him for help. Following this, he invites her inside and leaves a voicemail for his friend, but it appears that he is only pretending. Carlos then makes coffee for Nina and asks about her background. She reveals that they are from Romania and moved to Spain about 1.5 years ago, and they used to work together at a spa. After a brief chat, Nina proceeds to leave, and he watches her through the window. Later that night, as Carlos returns home, he notices an unfamiliar man banging on his apartment building's door. Since no one lets him in, Carlos helps by opening the door for him. The man then goes to Alexandra's apartment and starts banging on the door, but no one answers. Days later, Carlos notices Nina arriving at her sister's apartment with a locksmith. The man drills through the door and eventually breaks it open. After he leaves, Carlos accompanies Nina inside the apartment, where there is no trace of Alexandra. But they do find some broken chairs in the living room. Nina then decides that she will stay here until she finds her sister. Later that night, Carlos is working on his designs when he notices Nina watching him through the window, and they lock eyes. The next morning, Nina asks if his police friend found any information about her sister, but Carlos explains that his friend is currently out of town and will not return for another 3 weeks. She responds that she can't wait that long and decides to go to the police right away. Hearing this, Carlos stops her and invites her inside for breakfast. As they drink tea, he asks why the sisters used to argue so much. Nina reveals that they have been working together for a long time to support their parents and pay for their apartment, but Alexandra became selfish and ran away with all their savings, which are 3,000 euros. Carlos then tells her about the man he saw knocking on Alexandra's door the other day, and Nina concludes that he must be Bogdan, her sister's boyfriend. Upon hearing this, Carlos theorizes that Alexandra is with her boyfriend. He asks Nina to return home and promises to inform her if her sister returns. However, Nina refuses and says that she needs the money at any cost. She insists on going to the police, so Carlos reluctantly agrees to accompany her. In the following scene, the two go to the police station to file a missing persons report. However, because the sisters were arguing before her disappearance, they suspect Alexandra left on her own, and they will have to wait a while before actively searching for her. Nina then mentions how her parents are going to lose the apartment if they don't get 3,000 euros. Surprisingly, Carlos is willing to give her the money so she can return home. Nina is taken aback and has no idea why a stranger is offering to help her. She asks if he has any hidden motives, but he responds that he just wants to help her and nothing else. The next day, when Carlos returns home from work, he hears the landlord accusing Nina of bringing numerous men to the apartment and running an inappropriate business. However, Carlos intervenes to defend her, explaining that he mistook her for her sister. After that, Carlos gives Nina the 3,000 euros, which she accepts after some hesitation. The next evening, Nina arrives at Carlos's store and announces that her parents have received the money. She expresses her appreciation and invites him to dinner as a thank you gift, but Carlos refuses her invitation, saying that she doesn't owe him anything. Upon hearing this, Nina becomes confused and questions why he helped her and wonders if Alexandra asked him to get rid of her. But Carlos once again assures her that he helped her of his own accord. The two then walk home together, and during this time, Nina asks about his family. Carlos reveals that his parents are dead and he doesn't have any siblings. She inquires about his romantic life, and he admits that he's never had a girlfriend. Surprised, Nina asks if he's never felt lonely, but Carlos responds that he enjoys his own company and doesn't feel the need for anyone else. They soon arrive at the apartment, and Nina insists on doing him a favor to thank him. She brings him to her place and begins to give him a massage. However, while she's doing this, Carlos suddenly gets up and starts to dress. Nina asks what happened, but he doesn't respond and leaves. The next day, Carlos keeps an eye on a beautiful woman and decides to kill her since he has run out of meat. He then follows the woman and her husband all the way to a secluded beach. The couple soon begins having fun in the water. While they are busy, Carlos gets inside their car and turns on the headlights. The husband quickly rushes to intervene, but Carlos tragically runs him over and kills him. The tragic sight terrifies the wife, and she begins to scream. Carlos then goes to the beach and waits for her to come out. However, the woman is so scared that she remains in the water. She attempts to swim away from him while screaming for help, but due to fatigue and shock, the woman ends up drowning. This greatly disappoints the cannibal, and he has no choice but to return empty-handed. 2 days later, he is working at his store when Nina unexpectedly shows up. She explains that the police called her, and it turns out they have found a dead woman who is the same age as Alexandra. And so, they have summoned Nina to identify the body. Carlos offers to accompany her, and they proceed to the police station. However, upon viewing the body, it turns out to be the woman who drowned at sea the other night. The next evening, Carlos returns home from work to the sound of a man screaming from Nina's apartment. When he notices Bogdan leaving, he rushes to check on Nina and discovers her crying on the floor. Nina reveals that Bogdan somehow found out about her sending money to her parents. Now he is accusing her of murdering her sister for money and threatening to call the cops. Nina swears that she hasn't harmed her sister, so Carlos comforts her and brings her to his house. He then tucks her into his bed while he sleeps on the couch. The next morning, Carlos is awakened by police officers ringing his doorbell. He pretends not to be home and hides from them, so the cops eventually leave. Shortly after, Nina wakes up, and Carlos tells her that Bogdan might come back to hurt her, so he suggests she stay at his place until things calm down. Nina agrees and thanks him for everything. Later on, when Carlos returns from work, he notices cops entering the building and checking outside Alexandra's flat. Afterward, he removes Alexandra's flyer from his board and throws it away. The next evening, when Carlos returns home, he discovers that Nina has cooked dinner for them. But he finds it very difficult to eat since it's not human meat. This greatly upsets Nina, and it's clear that she has started to develop feelings for him. Nina suddenly asks him if he liked Alexandra. But Carlos doesn't understand why she would think that, so she reveals that she saw her flyer at the apartment, which disappeared soon after. She becomes emotional and says how her sister has taken everything from her throughout her life. However, Carlos clarifies that he was never interested in Alexandra and that she didn't take anything from Nina. He then tells her that he has a cabin in the snowy mountains where he often goes. He invites her to spend some time there to refresh herself, and Nina is excited to hear this. The next morning, they arrive at the mountains and spend the entire day exploring and having fun. They return to the cabin in the evening and drink in front of the fireplace. Nina says that this feels like a dream and she is very happy. But she soon becomes unconscious, and it turns out that Carlos had spiked her drink. Following this, Carlos undresses her and lays her on the table. He then prepares his butcher knife. However, just when he's about to kill her, he can't bring himself to do so. Carlos then realizes that he is actually falling in love with her, and decides to give up on his plan. The next morning, Nina wakes up in bed, naked and confused. She doesn't question anything about last night and is just happy to be with the person she loves. They then spend the whole day playing in the snow and admiring the mountains. In the evening, they sit around the fire, and Carlos abruptly reveals that he murdered Alexandra. He explains that last night he tried to kill Nina too but couldn't. Nina doesn't believe this and says he could never do that. However, he admits that, aside from Alexandra, he has killed and eaten many other women. He then tells her that they need to go to the city because the police are looking for her. If she goes missing for a few days, the police will suspect her for her sister's murder. However, Nina still hasn't been able to process what he just told her. She asks why he didn't kill her last night if he tried to. Carlos says he couldn't, so she asks him to kill her right now. It's in the middle of nowhere, and no one will ever find out. When Carlos hesitates, Nina says that it's because what he said is not true, and he's just lying. In the end, Carlos tells her that he had desired Alexandra with all his heart from the moment he saw her. This is the reason he ate her, and the same thing happened with other women as well. But for some reason, he couldn't feel that desire for Nina. This leaves the poor girl speechless and distraught at the same time. In the final scene, we see the two driving toward the city, and Nina seems to be very angry and frustrated. She suddenly swerves the car, causing it to fly off the cliff. As a result, they are involved in a horrific car accident. Carlos limps out of the car and notices Nina's lifeless body lying in the distance. He embraces her and breaks down in tears. The movie then comes to an end as we see him returning to his lonely life in the city. Thus, we reach the end of this film. Thanks for watching. You can like this video to support us. Don't forget to subscribe for more content. See you in the next video. Goodbye.